Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight. Feel free to drop your name in the chat and where you're joining us from. Let me just make sure that everybody should be able to chat now, but feel free to drop your name in the chat and where you're joining us from. And we'll get started in a few minutes. We have Jose joining us from Los Angeles, California. We have Priscilla joining us, Zachary joining us. Hello, hello. We have Yolanda joining us from Virginia, Katie from Houston. Also, my dog is taking a nap. She just woke up, but her snores are really loud. I apologize if she starts snoring with Karen from State College, from Maryland. Nice to see you here, Karen. John from Washington, Tonda from Indiana, Gabe from Baltimore. We have Cynthia from Houston. Oh, hi, Damon. We have Damon from Ohio. We have Augustine from Buffalo, New York. Hi, Chris. We have Chris from Florida, Linda from Minnesota, AJ from Wisconsin. And then we have Catherine from Virginia. We also have Dr. Bambi joining us, who accidentally joined from the other side, but it's okay. We'll welcome her here either way. Let's see, who else do we have? We have Ken joining us from Ohio. Bridget joining us from California. Hi, Bridget. We have Catherine joining us from Virginia. And I think we just enabled the closed captioning, so thank you to my colleague who did that. And we have my colleague Courtney calling in from DC. I'm going to go ahead and get started in just a minute here. Just going to give it another minute to see how many folks join. We have Ramona joining us from New York City. Well, it seems like it's slowing down a bit. There's still a few folks in here, but I'll let them kind of come in and introduce themselves as the time passes. But again, hello everyone and Happy New Year. Welcome to Tenant Talk Live. My name is Sid Betancourt and I use she, they pronouns. And I'm a housing advocacy organizer with the coalition. And in case you don't already know where you are, attending Tenant Talk Live, where we provide opportunities for tenants and residents to connect with the coalition and also with one another so we can share best practices, learn how to be more involved in federal housing policies and leading within your communities. So I'm really eager to meet with you today. It's going to be a very laid back and chill conversation today as we kind of reset for how housing justice advocacy will look like in 2023. And I really just want to hear from you today. So I'm excited to have some folks come off mute today. So we won't have any guest speakers, but like I said, I'll be facilitating a listening session and we'll do a Google Jamboard similar to what we did a few months ago with tenant rights and the tenant process, but it'll be a lot more laid back this time. And yeah. Hold on a second, I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. But before I get started with that, I do want to go over just the few logistics that we go over every time. This session is being recorded and it will be put on YouTube afterwards, and we'll be sharing that recording with you later on this week. And if you have any questions, please feel free to utilize the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And you can also feel free to use the chat to share your thoughts with the group as well. And we'll be sharing all that information in an email at the end of the week as well. And if you're signed up for NLIHC emails, just make sure that you look for the connection on Friday, and that eBlast will contain all the recap materials for you. So again, thank you all for joining today. I see that we have Mary Cook joining us, and Dr. Bambi is also here, who I see is joining on the opposite side, and I'm so sorry. I'm not sure why it did that, but feel free to hang out with us in the panelist room. There's really no big deal. But we also have Michael joining us from Massachusetts. Okay, so before we dive deeper into the listening session, and because it's kind of a new year, I kind of just want to, there's like a lot of folks here that join like every month, and sometimes there's new folks, but I really just wanted to use this new year to kind of reset and set some ground rules with you all so that, you know, we can kind of just be in general agreement, and we can like review them every month as well if we want to, but I think it would be cool to kind of just have a general idea of how we like lead these discussions. And so I'm going to share my screen and have like the current rules that I have right now. All right. Can y'all give me a thumbs up if y'all can see that? It should be a Google Doc with the rules on there. Cool. Awesome. So the first rule just being the platinum rule, so treating others the way they want to be treated. So in other words, just considering how others want to be treated and how that might differ from how you want to be treated. And especially because we're in a virtual setting, the second rule is just making sure that you're muting your mic, especially when it says when speaking, but it should say when not speaking, so that others have an opportunity to speak and be heard by others. And then the third rule is listen with an open mind and empathy. And then the fourth rule that I have on here is if you have spoken already, give other attendees a chance to participate. And so those are the rules that I have right now, but I want to give us like maybe 3 or 5 minutes or so to kind of hear from the audience as well and see what y'all think about these rules and see if there's any other ones that you want to join or you want to add on to this list before we move on to the listening session. And feel free to raise your hand too. I see Chris put that we need to push for more rental protections for local and state and federal levels, and I definitely agree. I think that will be a really important part of our discussion in a second too. But is there any feedback on these rules? I have Augustine who has raised their hand, and Augustine, you should be allowed to talk now if you want to share your thoughts really quickly.
I'm wondering if I can be heard.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Did you want to add some thoughts to the rules, to the ground rules, Augustine?
Basically, this is satisfactory to me. I understand.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'll go ahead and put you back in the general audience then.
Thank you.
And then Kayla just said that I had it right before I fixed it, which you're totally right. And then I think Christopher also noted that HUD needs accountability for not responding and enforcing regulations. Definitely agree and see how that can be a really big issue. That's definitely something that I've seen. And then KL, I can actually bring you off mute if you'd like, so you can share your thoughts if you like to, but no pressure. But it should be, you should be allowed to talk now if you'd like. Kale, did you want to add anything to the ground rules?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Oh, hot dog, I didn't realize. Excuse me.
No, no worries.
Yes, I had an emergency come up before the end of the year and called HUD. And the menu recording said that they would get back to me in 24 hours. They never responded. For 2 weeks, I tried 2 or 3 times a day, got no response whatsoever. I was frantic. And I finally went to legal services in the town where I work and begged them for help, and they did.
That's
But
great.
why can't HUD be available to help us when we need them?
Yeah. No, for sure. And I'm sorry that you experienced that delay in communication. Do you mind sharing the name of the organization that helped you out too, and like where you're from?
Yes, I am a participant in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. It is administered out of Winchester, Virginia, but I live in a different county called Clark, Clarke, Clark County. And the tenant where I live, a tax credit. I'm sorry, I said tenant. The landlord where I live is a tax credit organization, and they've raised my rent over $2,000. I've been here 1.5 years, and they were raising it again in the middle of our lease. And I felt surely that that was against HUD regulations and was desperate to get help. I finally did get some legal help, but not from HUD. When I did finally hear from HUD, they said that I would be required to absorb the entire $150 a month increase, but I've had no change in my income. So I'm feeling extremely bullied. And many of the people who live in my housing unit are not voucher recipients, and they also had contracts. And we were without any recourse. They wanted us to sign a paper or give notice that we would vacate within 30 days. And we did neither of those things. We're staging a tenant. I guess you could call it a sit-in in the old days. We're a tenant staying in our apartment inn. I'm laughing. I'm sorry.
No, no worries at all.
I'm being silly,
No,
but I'm laughing out loud. So this was the problem, and I was desperate for help. I finally got a hold of a person out of the Richmond office in for HUD, and he was extremely helpful. And but nothing from regular HUD, just from the Housing Choice office out of Richmond. And apparently we're not the only ones this is happening to, with the rent raises in the middle of leases. My lease isn't over till the end of August, and they were trying to force this hike in rent as of the 1st of January.
It's ridiculous. Well, hopefully the legal aid services was able to help as much as they could. And we also have some folks that are on the call right now that might be able to answer some questions too. If you want to drop your email in the chat and they can reach out to you, but feel free to use the folks that are on this call as a resource too. And thank you again for sharing. KL, is it, or?
Yes, I signed on as Catherine, but I usually go by my initials, which are KL.
Awesome. Okay, KL it is. But thank you again for sharing it. I'm going to go ahead and move on so we can hear from other folks as well. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have a lot of folks in the chat that are also talking about their experience and showing their support, just saying to reach out to your elected officials if federal agencies aren't responding. Linda sharing that LIHTC can raise accords of the area median income of the area. And then Karen Rhodes is also sharing that the tax credit properties aging out, the result exploding rent increases. And that's something that we're also looking at with the research that we're doing at NLHC. Cool. So if there aren't any other comments with the ground rules, I'll go ahead and stop sharing those. But again, I'll share them at the beginning of each call, or at least I'll try to, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. But I'll go ahead and move forward with our listening session, just so that we can spend that time on there. So I'll ask my colleague Courtney to share the Jamboard that we'll be working off of. And the way that this is going to work, it's going to be the same that it was when we did it with Noelle and Sarah a couple of months ago, where you will drop your thoughts in the chat, and then Gabby and Courtney, my colleagues, will be helping out and pasting your comments into the Jamboard. And I'll make sure that I have like a shareable copy of this to share with you all in the connection afterwards. And by the way, I did see a comment saying, just making sure that you're able to get the connection emails. If you're not getting them, please let me know. We can add you to that list. So challenges in housing justice and organizing in 2023. So the first one is just, what are some, or sorry, not 2023, it should say 2022 in this past year. So if there's anything that you've experienced within the past year that you'd kind of want to share, kind of as like an experience that you've had, any like lessons learned from those challenges, like please feel free to drop those in the chat, and we'll copy and paste those into the Jamboard. So I see the first one that we have here is the one that was shared earlier, just that HUD needs accountability for not responding. And I know that Catherine shared earlier her experience with HUD taking a little bit too long. We also have do have a lot of folks talking about light tech. So we have Michael sharing that light tech rents on properties that are not aging out had across the board rent increases last year for about 8 or 9%. And this would have raised the Section 8 voucher payments, but this should have no effect on 30% of income that voucher tenants pay. And I think we just pasted that one into the Jamboard. Michael, do you want to share a little bit more? I can go ahead and unmute you so you can speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's our understanding at the Mass Alliance of Tenants is that there were across the board rent increases for inflation in the light tech program, but that would have affected the light tech rents would have gone up, which also means that the voucher payments, if they were accepting vouchers, would have gone up too. But those would normally be paid by the housing authorities that pay the vouchers to the landlords. It would not affect a tenant who is in a voucher unit because they would pay 30% of income, period. So unless your tenant income household for the household went up or down, there would be no change in your the rent that you pay. At least that's what it's supposed to be. But obviously the legal service people that you're working with can shed more light on the specifics.
Yeah. From what I'm understanding from what you're saying though, is that it seems kind of like illegal to raise the rent for those voucher holders unless their income went up.
Well, for the tax credit tenants, the you know, that were set at you know 30% of 60% of the median when they were rented up, or sometimes 55%. So there was a fixed rent, and tenants moved in paying that rent. Some tenants moved in had a voucher that covered it, but many did not. Most did not, and those tenants would get socked with a rent increase. The one piece of good news is that that would be subject to rent controls locally. So a locality could cut those rents back. But that's going to happen each year. The light tech rents are recalculated based on inflation.
It really is unfortunate. Thank you so much for sharing, Michael.
Sure.
And Karen is also sharing some more in the chat, just saying that this housing injustice timing she's noticed is coinciding with the aging out of light tech properties. And for those that don't know what light tech is, it's the low income housing tax credit. I just realized we've been talking about it a lot. I didn't mention what the acronym stood for. We have Chris sharing how mailing issues have become really big. It's been mailed to the landlord's address to avoid delays and theft, which is really unfortunate and a big issue. Let's see. Oh, we do have a really good question that I'll address at the end of the webinar, but just remind me to talk about the transportation funding for the forum if it wasn't addressed already. So let's see, what else do we have out here? And don't feel free to raise your hand as well, folks, and I can unmute you too if you'd like to speak instead of dropping your thoughts in the chat. So we have another comment here that says rent control was voted into by the city of St. Paul. 4% except landlords can self-certify up to 8%, and 20 years going back now for new construction exempt. Let me see if I can find who wrote that one. I believe that was Linda. Linda, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that, and then I can invite Augustine back on. And Linda, you should be good to unmute now.
Okay, I don't live in St. Paul though, so I probably am not an authority.
No worries.
The citizens voted through a referendum, 3% limit. If I typed 4, it was a typo. 3% limit of rent raise, but the landlords said that they will neglect to keep up the buildings if they can't raise their rent by 8%, and they can self-certify themselves by 8% without even going through City Hall. So they basically kind of smashed it. And the landlords were heard to say out loud in chambers, oh, those poor kids over there in St. Paul who voted for that, those silly kids, they don't know how hard it is to be a landlord.
We do hear that a lot. I think, you know,
a lot of our legislators are landlords.
And I'm seeing that in the Jamboard too, and in the chat, and I've definitely heard that from a lot of folks, and it would be really nice to see folks with lived experience and advocates stepping into those positions too. But there's definitely, I think, a difference in resources. Thank you, Linda, so much. Is there anything you wanted to add before I move on to the next person?
I was just going to ask, how come the LIHTC, the low-income housing tax credit, is adjusting for the area median income, and the renters who are there and are stable are being basically put out on their ear? It doesn't seem very realistic. Where are all those people going to go, and who are they going to fill those buildings with? I mean, it's senior citizens, it's poor people, it's folks with disabilities. I don't understand how they're getting a tax credit to act like that. Yeah,
no, for sure. And I wish I could have a solid answer to that question. But
thank you.
Definitely not my area of expertise. But if there's anybody on the line that wants to answer that question right now too, feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute you. But if not, I can follow up with you, Linda, once I have an answer to that.
Yeah, can you mute me? Because I don't know how to do it actually.
Oh, no worries. I got you. And then we have Augustine who raised their hand. Augustine, you should be good to go now.
Yes, I live here in Buffalo, New York, and the issue I'm facing is renters' independence. renters' privacy, personal privacy. My current landlord is combining mental health with real estate, where you find some tenants are under the adult protective services. I have a close neighbor, and it's kind of difficult for someone like myself to get along, and there are many issues coming up. So if they could look into this issue and try to separate mental health services from people's privacy in their own homes. My apartment is a twin apartment building, where next door is the people with mental issues. And in fact, the closest neighbor in the next part of the building is a mentally ill person, is chronically ill, in fact, and it's burdensome, it's troubling. I'm wondering how that could be solved.
So, just so that I understand what you're saying, Augustine is just making sure that the tenants in the building that you have are able to receive like proper mental health care, or am I-
Personally, I'm okay. And I believe elsewhere there are people like me who do not have personal privacy, where you find their neighbors who are not ill, who are not sick, who are not under hospital care, but would like that privacy to be in their own homes without having to interact with the people who are mentally ill.
And we have Linda in the chat who said, agree, privacy is a right to medical privacy too. And that's also something that we can talk about. Thank you so much, Augustine. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
What I would like to add is a violation of personal privacy. Give the mentally ill their own privacy, and their regular tenants their privacy, without having to carry the burden of someone who is mentally ill and I'm not under their care, and I'll have to share their burden. That's my challenge I'm facing here.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing, Augustine.
Thank you.
And I think we had Carrie Robbie who wanted to share, and I think it was probably an answer to the previous question that Linda might have had. But Carrie, if you want to unmute, we'll move forward with some of the answers we
Hello.
have.
Yes, I had two answers. I wanted to respond to the last gentleman, Augustine. The reason that there are individuals moving into communities is a law under Adults with Disabilities Act. It's called integrated housing. And so fortunately or unfortunately, wherever there is housing available, someone can show that they are able to live on their own or with some assistance. They are allowed by law to integrate into any community, just like where anyone else lives. Unfortunately, here in Washington, also, we don't have segregated housing for mental health. There are psychiatric hospitals, but those are short-term stay and not intended for a housing solution. But you will see housing integration as it is a right of law. So for interaction, you could ask about the person's natural supports or their multidisciplinary team if they are violating any kind of lease agreement or something like that, but they do have the right to be in the community. I also wanted to address, there was another item in the question box about tax credit. There will exist a grievance process with any provider of services. In other words, when you come across a tax credit property that is either not substantiating the rent increase. For example, they've not put any more value into the property, but they are experiencing a rent hike and an increase, and the tenants are going, whoa, what the heck is this? I can't afford this. It would behoove that community to find representation. And you can go to places like the Justice Project, which provides legal advocacy and services. for low-income and indigent folks. We have one here in Washington called Northwest Justice Project, which is free to get information. Also, each of those tenants has the right to file a grievance against the housing commissioner for their state and just kind of say the same theme, and that is that our rent is going up. There has not been more value increased in this property, and we really can't afford to pay these challenging rates. Now a second prong attack, and then I'll finish talking, I promise. The
No, you-
second prong, sorry, for all of those people, every one of them is to go to your housing authority and fill out the Section 8 application, and that is low income. Sometimes you'll find that you're on a wait list, but if everybody that qualifies for those housing subsidies and vouchers and low income things, if everybody that qualified filed for those, your state and your municipality and mine, we'd all have more realistic numbers for what people can actually afford to pay for rent. And it will eventually, and it may take a while, but it will eventually trickle down to providing long-term housing subsidy. For example, in Grant County, Washington, where I am, our Section 8 waitlist is about 2 years. That's why I implore everybody to file for that, because you don't know where you're going to be in 2 years. Are you going to be disabled? Are you still going to be working? Do you need it? Do you not need it? And then it's just a matter of, fortunately, I don't need it 2 years later. But anyway, so anybody in those communities that are experiencing a huge rent increase, please, due diligence is required of you. Don't wait until it's too long. Someone else mentioned that in the comments. Again, go to your grievance process for housing and urban development on that property. As well, go to your housing authority and fill out your applications to get on the Section 8 low income wait list. When you're eligible for your voucher, you may apply it sometimes, but not always, to the rent that you're currently paying in the apartment that you're currently in, to avoid relocating. In other instances, you may have to find alternative housing, but the voucher will also help you relocate.
Thank you so much, Carrie, for sharing. And
Thank you.
yeah, no, thank you so much. And I did see a couple of more resources dropped in the chat. We have Bridget Simmons who shared our Advocates Guide article to LIHTC. There's also 2 other resources, and I'm going to say this now so that I remember to include it in the follow-up email, but I know that the National Housing Law Project has an Advocates Guide on LIHTC, and we had a tenant talk live a few months ago that also spent some time on LIHTC, so hopefully we'll be able to share that out so that you folks have that resource. And then before we move on to the next part of the Jamboard, I'm going to invite one more person to come off mute, and then we'll move on to the next slide of the Jam. But thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts. I appreciate it a lot. And Damon, you should be able to talk now. I think you had a question in the chat too.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is that with HUD raising the AMI, and actually when they do that, it raises the rent rates as well. So where are they getting these numbers that people are making these types of incomes that they can actually afford $1,200 for a 1-bedroom in a city where the minimum wage is still under $10? How does that supposed to work? It doesn't.
It doesn't, I agree.
No,
I
it
agree.
doesn't. We're in a big circle, and they keep raising. They raise the rates for utilities. They raise the rates for rent. I mean, what are we supposed to do? I'm like, I'm on workman's comp. I was on workman's comp, and they cut me off. So I can't work yet. I'm still under workman's comp, but I don't get paid. So like in my situation, and there's no assistance. And I've been in my apartment for 16 years. my rent went up last year, double. I was paying $450, now I'm paying $820, almost double, sorry. But it doesn't make any sense to any of us that the government is basically not putting their foot down or helping citizens with these issues. And that's my problem. HUD is responsible for a lot of stuff with the tax credits and the housing, the affordable housing. Who is saying this housing is affordable? Because it's not.
Thank you for sharing,
Yeah.
David.
And it's
I'm
just extremely
sorry.
frustrating. Sorry.
It is very frustrating. And I appreciate you sharing too. And I know you've been a strong advocate. And I hear you all the time and I see you. So just know that like I'm sending all the good vibes because I know it's been a rough year.
Yeah.
And I know just to address your question too about why there hasn't been a federal law to protect tenants from rent gouging. That's definitely a priority with coalitions, and we're working with our tenant cohort to address that as well. And we'll keep folks updated on that. I think there is like a bill that was introduced earlier today discussing that from the federal standpoint, but hopefully we'll also be able to see more local like ordinances come up in bills. So hopefully
It's almost like, sorry, it's too little too late. You know what I mean? It's a little bit like too little too late.
I think I heard somebody else trying to unmute, but I wasn't sure. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide, the second slide in the Jamboard. And again, thank you all so much for sharing. And again, I kind of wanted to start with the challenges because I know that it's been a really rough past year with inflation, but also with emergency rental assistance ending, and just like a lot of different things, a lot of different factors that have been making it very hard for housing just to be affordable and accessible to you all. And I kind of wanted to just like shift the conversation and kind of talk about any successes that you might have seen in the past year while trying to address a lot of the issues that you just spoke about. And again, you can feel free to raise your hand and I can take you off mute, but if you want to drop them in the chat, you can also drop them in the chat. And I'll take it from there. And again, thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts. So we have Carrie Robbie, who shared that there was a record number of folks that were housed in their program in 2022. So that was a good year. And Carrie, can you remind us what state you're from? I think you mentioned it earlier. Washington, yes. Thank you. And then Linda also sharing on Section 8 voucher and on 40% of budget while on voucher. I can go ahead and take somebody off of mute if they want to talk about successes or just their experience with housing justice advocacy in general. We have John, who shared that Washington State gave more money for housing. And then we do have, I know Mary Cook, you've had your hand up for a while, so you can feel free. You should be able to speak now.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I'm coming at this from a different perspective because I work with a county council member. And I have seen all the comments and I can understand why people get so frustrated. I guess from what I see, I guess I'm lucky that I work in an area where not everybody's corrupt. And that's why I work for this county council member, in fact. But I also know that on the state level, I have people, that I can send constituents to. It's very important. Even if you think your council member or your delegate or your senator is corrupt, go ahead, send them an email. Keep a record of everything that, every letter that you send, because later if you decide, this senator's not doing what I want him to do, then you've got something to go to the press with. But hopefully you'll get some help along the way. And then I would just like to say one other thing. The reason I'm have stuck behind my county council member for many, many years is because, and not always as an employee, is because I know that one day I'm going to need help. And I have needed help in the past. And guess what? I got my help because I went out there and campaigned for him. I didn't necessarily give him any money. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't, but I was out there and he knows my name. He knows my face. And so that always helps to participate in political campaigns.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mary. And, I do think it's like worth just sharing too, to just reach out to your elected officials. I think that's like a really important message, and that's something that we encourage folks to do all the time. So I really appreciate you sharing. Let me see what we have in the chat right now. We do have Laura Ramos sharing that New Jersey has good laws which are supposed to prevent or stop landlord retaliation. But it's still kind of challenging. Let me see. But because of the heavy weight put into the Division of Civil Rights and the HUD Fair Housing Equal Opportunity Office to be neutral, they completely fail in their enforcement duties to stop the retaliation, which can lead to tenants experiencing homelessness or, being at risk of homelessness. Do you want to share a little bit more about that, Laura? I'll go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, yes. I'm Laura Ramos. I'm an advocate and resident in New Jersey. And whether I'm trying to help other residents or trying to get justice for my disabled household, some of the biggest problems in New Jersey, and I know that these, from working with the National Housing Law Project and the National Low Income Housing Coalition for many years, these problems exist throughout the country. Is that when you contact the Division of Civil Rights in your state, or you contact HUD FHEO, HUD Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, you think that they're supposed to be acting on your behalf. You provide them the evidence, you provide them everything that shows that the landlord or the state housing authority or whoever it is doing the wrong things in violation of the laws, and that they are supposed to stop it. And that is part of their responsibilities. But they focus on they are supposed to be neutral, but the only condition they're supposed to be neutral is if they are supposed to be doing mediation or conciliation between the landlord or the state and you, and trying to work it out. And in that condition, the landlord or the state, whoever's doing the wrongdoing, doesn't have to admit to any wrongdoing. But if they see the wrongdoing, they should have to say, look, we're going to take you to court. We're going to do this and this and this because these things are wrong. And then once they stop doing the bad things, then there should be conciliation and mediation.
Thank you so much, Laura. Let's see. We have a lot of things coming in the chat. So I just want to make sure we get to those too. But again, we had Mary just sharing that the two council members negotiated a rent increase that was nearly half of what the landlord was pushing through, which again, we don't, rent increases aren't always the best, but where we can fight to make sure that they're as low as possible. That's a win. And then we also had somebody talking about removing a corrupt land bank member in Cook County. CJ O'Hara shared that. And hopefully that will lead to more transparency and access to housing equity. Let's see, what else did we have? In Minnesota, they created a shelter resident bill of rights by law, which created a 18th-month task force. And let's see what else. And then V. Sanchez just sharing that organizing gets the goods. We need tenant unions now, and lots of them. And I think there was like a similar sentiment shared by somebody else earlier. I think it was Christopher Benjamin that also shared that we just need to be in collective right now, which I totally agree with. Do the chats show up on YouTube as well? They don't, Deborah, but we can share the chat out in the email that we follow up with. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna invite maybe 1 or 2 more speakers to come off mute to share any successes that they want to talk about. But I think Jose, you were the first one in line. If you want to go ahead and unmute, you should be able to speak now. Jose, you should be able to speak now. I'll give it another second. If not, I'll move over. So, to a different-
Yes, good afternoon.
Hi,
It's Jose Flores.
hi, thank you for joining us, Jose.
Yeah, I'm multitasking today.
No worries.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment a little bit about myself. I'm here in California. I work for a nonprofit that used to be under Mental Health America Los Angeles, and now we're on our own nonprofit. So I've been utilizing some of the local benefits.gov information with actual experience on the board of Disability Rights California, which the government has an agency, you probably already know, in each state. Additionally, I've been able to collaborate with UCLA Center of Excellence. So they're very, very good resource of live programs, and they're adjusting to a lot of the processes being delivered to the community, which is what they do at the Center of Excellence with Dr. Kenneth Wells. He's actually been able to put together an opera for individuals who have recovered from the various diagnoses, specifically schizophrenia. And additionally, I do some work with Sean Markey. He's the director for Helping Hands Senior Foundation. They provide free durable medical equipment to individuals 65 and over, and housing. And they cover 6 counties here in California. So it keeps me a little bit busy. I do have a few irons in the fire, but they do have opportunity to collaborate in addition to that basic need that we've seen for quite some time. And the voting process, which we also work with here at my office, is also part of what they do with their committees in the Disability Rights California boards. Again, I can't praise them enough because they're way in there with a lot of our legislators and service providers, and it does matter which direction you look, they're on it. Additionally, some of the cyber stuff is now under the auspices of a satellite with Northrop Grumman, and the HIPAA concern is providing navigation through their satellites. So that being said, was there other basic resources like California grants portal? I was understanding that, yes, we're a nonprofit, yes, we do provide services, but there are agencies who will say they provide funding, but we have to be, as nonprofit, cautious about whether they have a actual special point of what is going to be the contract, special interest type of concern. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jose. And if you want to share any of those resources in the chat too, please feel free.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you so much. And then the last person that I have on here is Rachel Johnson. If you want to unmute Rachel, you can feel free to speak now. I think it should work.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I've been listening to the people talk about the light tech. So one of the success stories that I can help people to know some steps that they could take is and down in Miami, there's a property called Father Marquez Berry. And the tenants came together in regards to the rents being raised so high. And so they went to the compliance department in their county and they met with them along with getting a copy of the use agreement that explains each unit, how much it has to stay affordable and what are, the AMIs, everything in that capacity. So I would urge everybody to try to get those use agreements, because what they found is that the landlord at these light tech buildings are charging more than they're supposed to. And then with examination of some of the tenants' rents, but at the same time, there's other ways that they are charging tenants more, like charging fees like $50 just to use the washer and dryer, things like that. So it's important for you to go to the state finance office, and that's who regulates light tech properties, and contact your compliance department so that you can meet with them. But the most important thing is just to get organized as a resident council and begin to keep watch on each of your neighbors and, report back on a monthly basis, because puzzle pieces get put together as far as what's happening in the building. And most the management companies there or the people that's on the property don't even know what's in the use agreements. So I'm urging you to check those things out.
Thank you so much for sharing, Rachel. And it's really exciting to hear about those local wins too.
Well,
and I hope you're doing well.
yeah.
Cool. I just wanted to make sure I caught up on the comments in the chat as well before moving to the third slide really quickly. I know a lot of folks are talking about just making sure that we have a united front. And again, just thank you to those that are sharing legal resources, and I'll make sure to follow up with those folks afterwards via email so that y'all have those resources as well. And thank you all for sharing. I really appreciated your comment, Karen. If I got a nickel for every piece of advice or answer given, I would be a very rich person. And hopefully this is helpful for you all. So we can go ahead and move on to the third slide really quickly, just so that we can wrap up on time. And the third slide is just kind of talking about like what we are hoping to envision for housing justice and tenant movements in 2023. You'll see that we already have some in here just based on some of the things that you've all talked about in the chat. Pushing for more rental protections at all levels of government, having training for tenants, organizing to contend with the powers that we're facing against landlords and corporations, I really like the idea of the day rally in all states for the state capitol coming this summer. It seems like such a big idea, and I don't know how he would do it, but that seems like a really cool idea, and I support it. And yeah, a lot of folks talking about organizing. We need a federal resolution to the process of accountability, rent control, and illegal eviction. Homelessness will not stop unless the slumlords have accountability. Refining accountability by each state's direct needs. As for going to the media, we need to make sure that media is educated about the LIHTC program if we get anywhere with the media, and I definitely agree with that in any housing program. Damon, Sharon in the chat, trying to come up with a rally plan. Definitely feel free to share that with everyone too, get everyone involved. We have the Facebook group too, so hopefully you all can connect through there. We can organize in DC for those that can't go. Make sure to go to the state capitol. Cool. Let me see if there's anything else that I missed in the chat. Let's see. I don't see anything. A lot of you are connecting right now, which is nice, and it's really exciting to see you all talk together. Cool. There is just a few minutes left, and I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to get to everyone, but again, I think this really facilitated some good conversation. And again, like I said, this was just meant to be a super casual conversation, and I really appreciated you all sharing your experiences. And this chat will be available in our follow-up email. And again, if you're not connected to that, please feel free to let me know. I'm gonna see if there's like a more succinct way to get you all on that. I think I should have added you all onto that, but if you're not getting it still, please feel free to let me know. So yeah, that's it for this section of today's Tenant Talk Live. But again, feel free to email me if you have any suggestions for the future. We do have some exciting topics coming up. In the next couple of months, we'll have some folks who have traveled internationally to kind of talk about their experience with housing advocacy at a much bigger level, which is exciting. And we are looking for blog post authors on an ongoing basis for NLIHC's On the Homefront blog. And we did submit one recently from our very own Claudia Swanee, who is a very active advocate, and you often will see her on in the chat. And I'll post that link in the chat shortly, just because I don't think I had that ready before. And also, please don't forget to join our Facebook group if you have Facebook. We're still exploring internally just more ways to connect folks if you don't have Facebook, but for now, please feel free to connect via Facebook. And then if you're interested in attending the 2023 Housing Policy Forum in DC this March, we will be offering a limited amount of hotel scholarships to low-income people to attend the forum, and we'll drop that in the chat. Unfortunately, that's the only scholarships we'll be providing will be for the hotel. And again, sorry for that, but we're trying our best. So let me just share Claudia's blog post really quickly. And I think that's it for today. But again, feel free to reach out to me, folks, if you have any questions. And thank you all so much for being so engaging today. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you all on February 6th for our next Tenant Talk Live. Have a good evening, everybody. And then, Chris, there's not going to be a stipend for anything else besides the hotel. Sorry, I didn't answer that more directly, but thank you, everybody. Yeah, I know. Thank you all. Have a good night.